Verse 28. Tatvavitu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matvana sajate. Yet, O mighty armed one who is a knower of the truth concerning action and the modes of material nature, understands that it is the modes interacting with one another, and thus he remains unattached. Verse 29. Prakritir guna samuda sajante guna karmasu Tana Kritsna vido mandan Kritsna vinna vichalayet. Those bewildered by the modes of material nature are engrossed in material activities conducted by those modes. The wise should not disturb the ignorant who are bereft of proper knowledge. Verse 30. Mai sarvani karmane sanyasyadhyatma cetasa nirasir nirmamo bhutva yudyasva vigat varaha. Completely surrendering all your activities unto me, with your consciousness fully situated in the self, without any selfish motivation, without any sense of ownership, without grief, fight. Text 31. Ye mimatam idam nityam anutishtanti manavaha shadavanto nasuyanto Bhujante te pikarma bihi. Those that faithfully follow these instructions of mine without envy will become free from the bondage of actions. Verse 32. Ye tidad abhyasu yanto nanutistanti me matam sarvaganam vimudam stan vidinastam asetasaha. However, you should know that those persons who out of envy do not follow my instructions are deprived of all knowledge. They have lost sight of the goal of life and are bereft of intelligence. Verse 33. Sadrisham chestate svasya prakritirgana vanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a wise man acts according to his nature. All living beings act according to their natures, for what can repression achieve? Verse 34. Indriyas jarte ragad vesalviyavastitau tayarnava shamagachet tau hyasya paripantinau. The senses are attracted to and repelled by the objects of the senses. But one must not become controlled by such attraction or aversion, for they are obstacles. Verse 35. Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat svanusitat swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. It is better to perform one's own prescribed duties imperfectly rather than perform another's duty perfectly. It is better to die while performing one's own duties, for executing the duties of others is fraught with uncertainty. Anuvritti commentary by Jagad Swami Bhakti Gaurava Narasingha Maharaja. The faults of material life are many. Herein Sri Krishna has mentioned certain faults that a serious student of the Bhagavad Gita should be preeminently aware of. Ignorance, foolishness, selfish motivation, a false sense of proprietorship, as well as attraction and aversion to the sense objects are mentioned by Krishna. But more dangerous than any other fault is envy. Envy, it seems, is purely evil, as Krishna says that those who do not follow the teachings of Bhagavad Gita out of enviousness are bereft of all knowledge and intelligence. Another danger is the tendency of neglecting one's own duty and trying to perform the duty of another. In other words, Krishna tells Arjuna to tend to his own business. Arjuna was a Kshatriya, and his duty, as already discussed, was to protect and defend the kingdom. Arjuna, however, was showing leanings toward renunciation, becoming a monk, a sannyasi. Arjuna wanted to abandon his duty and perform that of another, but Krishna warns him that this is not a good idea. In fact, Krishna says it is even dangerous. Krishna explains that it is better to perform one's own duty imperfectly than perform another's duty perfectly. In particular, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to follow the codes of conduct set down for a Kshatriya, of which abandoning the battlefield for a warrior is not an option. Verse 36. Arjuna uvacha atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichan api varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. Arjuna asked, O Krishna, descendant of the Vrishnis, what is it that makes a man perform impious activities, even against his will, as if by force? Verse 37. Shri Bhagavan uvacha kama esha krodha esha raguguna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapatma vyajenami havarinam. Bhagavan Sri Krishna said, it is lust which transforms into anger that is manifest from the mode of passion. Know this lust to be totally insatiable and extremely evil. It is the great enemy of this world. Verse 38. Dumina vriyate vanir yata darsho malena cha yato bina vrito garbas tatatene dam avritam. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, and as the womb covers an embryo, similarly, lust covers the consciousness of the living being. Verse 39. Avritam ganam itena janino nichavarinya kama rupena konteya duspurena nalena cha. O Konteya, the discrimination of even a wise man can become covered by this eternal nemesis in the form of lust that is like an all-devouring fire. Verse 40. Indriyani manobuddhir ashadisthanam uchate itarvimo hayatesha ganamamvricha dehinam. It is said that the senses, mind, and intelligence are the sitting places of this enemy. Covering one's knowledge, it bewilders the embodied living being. Verse 41. Tasmatvam indriyan yado niyam yabharatarashaba papmanam prajahienam ganam viganam nashanam. Therefore, O noblest amongst the Bharatas, you must first bring the senses under control and eliminate lust, which is the embodiment of all impiety and the destroyer of knowledge and realization. Verse 42. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya paramanaha manasastu parabuddhir yo buddhi paratastu saha. It is said by the wise that the senses are superior to the sense objects, the mind is superior to the senses, and the intelligence is superior to the mind. Superior to the intelligence is the individual unit of consciousness. Verse 43. Evam buddhi param buddhva samstavyatmanam atmana jahi sastrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. O mighty armed Arjuna, knowing the individual unit of consciousness to be superior to the intelligence, steady the mind with the pure intellect of the self and conquer this indomitable enemy in the form of lust. Anuvritti commentary by Srila Guru Maharaj. Herein it is stated that the mind is superior to the senses and intelligence is superior to the mind. But above the intelligence is the consciousness or Atma. The material body is comprised of the mind, senses, and intelligence, and they are therefore considered as material elements. In chapter 7, verse 4 of Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna lists the 8 material elements as earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Then in the next verse, Krishna describes a superior energy known as Jiva Bhuta, the units of individual consciousness. Krishna says that this Jiva Bhuta, also known as Atma, is categorically different than the material elements. It is fully spiritual. But when lust, the all-devouring enemy of self-realization, covers the mind, senses, and intelligence of the superior Jiva Bhuta, then the knowledge and realization of the Jiva Bhuta are destroyed. Therefore, Krishna says that first the yogi must conquer lust. If one does not pursue the cravings of lust and instead takes control of one's lower self with one's higher self, lust will eventually be vanquished. However, if one tries to satisfy his burning lust, then it is like pouring fuel into a fire. We'll add a few notes and quotes on this segment. The love in this material world is a perverted reflection of pure love, or prema. Prema means love for the Supreme Person. In the material world, when our love is directed on the temporary things, places, and faces, ultimately our misdirected love ends up causing us great suffering. Even if a so-called loving relationship in this material world goes on for an entire lifetime, still, in the end, one of the persons in that relationship has to leave. They have to die. And it is seen many times that a couple that has been married for a very, very long time, when one of the persons in that relationship dies, and the other one dies very soon, they simply lose the will to live because they place all their love on a person in this material world. The relationships in this material world are temporary. It is described in the Vedas that the relationships, the families, the societies, the nations that come together are like sticks in a stream that come together for some time. Sooner or later, some disruption comes and those sticks are separated. It is a natural tendency for every soul to serve and to love, but when misdirected, it is the cause of great attachment and great suffering. When redirected into the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the person who can actually reciprocate our need, then it brings great joy, ananda, it brings eternal bliss and happiness. Bhakti Yoga is the process of redirecting our misdirected love and placing it on that person who can actually satisfy us and fulfill all of our internal desires. When one comes to the platform of prema, prema means pure love for the Supreme Person, then they can love every living entity, seeing all living beings as part and parcel of the Supreme Person. Such a person does not live in the world of exploitation where everything is seen as meant for my enjoyment, but rather everything is seen as meant for the enjoyment of the Supreme Person. And in this way, all the living entities that come in contact with such a person are helped back towards that person who can actually fulfill our most inner needs. That person is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We like to call him by the name of Krishna. He has many, many names. We prefer the name Krishna. The following was spoken by Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, in a lecture back in the 1970s. This lecture was on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, "So in the material world, there cannot be prema. Prema means love. The prema is only possible in the spiritual world. Here, what is going on as love, that is not love. That is lust. A boy loves a girl loves a boy. That is not love, that is lust. As soon as there is some disturbance in lusty affair, they divorce. So therefore, that is not love. So we should note it. That so-called love is bogus in this material world. Love cannot be possible. The very word love, prema, is specially reserved for Krishna. Prema Pumarto Mahan. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching, that the highest perfection of life is to evoke one's dormant love for Krishna. The love is there in the spiritual world. It is reserved for Krishna. But due to our foolishness, we are distributing that love in so many ways up to the dog. That is called illusion. We do not know where to apply love. If you see, all these words is touched with the word kama. Kama means lust. There's no question of love. And love, prema, and kama is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. What is prema and what is kama? To satisfy one's own senses, that is kama. Here, a boy and a girl in love, they say love, but no, it is not love. The boy wants to satisfy his senses, and the girl wants to satisfy her senses. That's all. Therefore, atmandriya pritivancha, everyone is trying to satisfy her own senses. That is kama, lust. And then what is prema? Krishnandriya priti icha dari prema nama. When the same propensity is transferred for satisfying Krishna's senses, just like the gopis. Srimati Pingala from the Srimad Bhagavatam, an expert in the arts of so-called lovemaking, who was once a prostitute and later became a fully self-realized soul, very nicely elaborates on this point and reminds us where to repose our loving tendency so we may actually achieve the love of our hearts. The prostitute Pingala said, "I am such a fool that I have given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. That most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I have ignorantly served insignificant men who could never satisfy my real desires and who have simply brought me misery." End quote. There was a hit song back in the 80s by one country singer named Johnny Lee, and it was called "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places." And basically in this material world, this is what is going on. We're looking for love in all the wrong places. Of course, in the song, he finally finds his true love, and I guess we're led to believe that they lived happily ever after. Johnny Lee himself did not write that song, somebody else did. But I can almost guarantee that the relationship that they are singing about no longer exists. And so those are the relationships in this material world. They have a beginning and they have an end. And more times than not, they end in great suffering for the living entity who has misdirected their love. In chapter 4 of the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Prabhupada gives a nice description of the difference between prema, love, and kama, lust. Text 164 through 171. Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust, but the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. The object of lust is only the enjoyment of one's own senses, but love caters to the enjoyment of Lord Krishna, and thus it is very powerful. Social customs, scriptural injunctions, bodily demands, fruit of action, shyness, patience, bodily pleasures, sense gratification, and the path of Varnashram Dharma, which is very difficult to give up. The gopis have forsaken all these, as well as their own relatives and their punishment and scolding, for the sake of serving Lord Krishna. They render loving service to him for the sake of his enjoyment. That is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure, like a clean cloth that has no stain. Therefore, lust and love are quite different. Lust is like dense darkness, but love is like the bright sun. So here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, a description of the love of the gopis of Vrindavan is given, and it is something quite different than what is taking place in this material world. The gopis exemplify the purest form of love for the Supreme Lord. Om Tat Sat Saditri Sri Mahabharati Sata Sahasram Samhitayam Vyasikyam Bhishma Parvani Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanisatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri Sri Krishna Arjuna Sambade Karma Yoga Nama Trichodhyaya. Om Tat Sat. Thus ends chapter 3, entitled Karma Yoga, from the conversation between Sri Krishna and Arjuna in the Upanishad known as Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Shastra of divine knowledge, from the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, the literature revealed by Vyas in 100,000 verses. That ends chapter 3, and we will move into chapter 4, Jnana Yoga, in the next segment. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai, Shri Guru Parampara ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari 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 Bol.